From a shipwrecked merchant who lost everything, to a North Korean defector who risked it all for a bowl of rice, to a Roman emperor who dreaded the very power he held. Some lives are defined by impossible hardship. What if I told you their secret to survival wasn't some superhuman strength, but a 2,000-year-old philosophy born from that suffering? A philosophy that isn't about becoming emotionless, but about finding a way to be unbreakable when the world is trying to break you. We tend to think of philosophy as something born in quiet lecture halls, dreamed up by people with soft hands and easy lives. But the world's most resilient philosophy wasn't born in a classroom. It was forged in the fires of human suffering. It was built by people who had everything taken from them, and in that emptiness, they found everything that truly mattered. These aren't just footnotes in a history book. These are the human stories that secretly built Stoicism. In this video, we'll uncover 3 of those lives. We'll explore how their ancient wisdom can help you build your own unbreakable mind, not by avoiding pain, but by transforming it. Because Stoicism is a survival guide, and its first chapter is always the same. What stands in the way becomes the way. Our first story isn't from ancient Rome. It's from one of the darkest places on Earth today, North Korea. Yeonmi Park was born into a world where her mother's first lesson wasn't "I love you," but a warning. Don't even whisper. The birds and mice can hear you. The only thing anyone was permitted to love was the dear leader. Growing up, seeing dead bodies in the river was just a part of her daily routine. Hunger was constant. She and her family ate dragonflies and grasshoppers simply to survive. She eventually escaped because at night, starving in the darkness, she could see a faint glow of light across the border in China. That light became her only hope, not for a concept like freedom, which she didn't even know, but for a single bowl of rice. At just 13, she and her mother crossed a frozen river into China, only to fall into the hands of human traffickers. Her childhood ended in an instant, watching her mother sacrifice herself to a broker just to protect her. Yeonmi was sold for less than $200. For years, she lived as a slave, enduring unimaginable abuse. Her father, who had also escaped to North Korea, later died of illness in China. She had to bury his ashes alone on a cold mountain. In this relentless nightmare, where everything was outside of her control, her country, her body, her family, she discovered the one thing that was hers and hers alone, her mind. Without ever hearing the word Stoicism, she embodied its 4 cardinal virtues. First, there was courage, the courage to cross a frozen river under the eyes of armed guards, and to keep going after witnessing horrors that would break most adults. Second, temperance or self-control. After finally reaching South Korea, she threw herself into education with an intensity that made her sick, choosing the long-term goal of knowledge over any short-term comfort. Third, justice. She now uses her voice to fight the regime that tried to erase her, speaking for the millions who are still voiceless. And finally, wisdom. The wisdom to understand what was in her power and what wasn't. She couldn't change her past, but she could control her response to it. She could choose to educate herself, to speak out, and to find meaning in her suffering. In one of her interviews, she shared a profoundly Stoic idea that the experience, as horrific as it was, gave her a perspective on freedom that most of us will never comprehend. Her story is a raw, modern testament that these principles aren't abstract ideals. They are survival tools for the deepest of human hells. Now, let's travel back more than 2,300 years to meet the man who unknowingly started it all. Zeno of Citium wasn't a philosopher. He was a wealthy merchant, a man whose fortune was tied up in one of the ancient world's most valuable goods, Tyrian purple dye. Extracted from thousands of sea snails, this was the color of emperors and kings. Zeno's life was of comfort and predictable profit. Then one day, a storm turned the Mediterranean Sea against him. His ship, carrying his entire fortune, was smashed to pieces. He washed ashore near Athens, a foreigner in rags, having lost everything he owned in a single moment. His identity as a wealthy merchant was gone, dissolved into the sea. For most people, this would be a story of ruin. For Zeno, it was the beginning of his real life. The story goes that in his despair, he wandered into a bookshop in Athens. He picked up a book about the life and thoughts of Socrates, who had been dead essentially. Reading about Socrates' indifference to wealth and his focus on inner character, Zeno had a revelation. He realized that the life of the mind was more valuable than any cargo. At that moment, the bookseller pointed to a real philosopher walking by and said, "Follow that man." And Zeno did. He spent the next 20 years studying, stripping away his old identity and building a new one based on internal virtue. He learned that the storm hadn't taken anything that was truly his. Wealth, status, possessions, these were all externals, things that fortune could give and take away. The only thing that was truly his was his character, his reason, and his choice in how to respond. Eventually, Zeno began teaching what he'd learned in a public space in Athens called the Stoa Poikile, the painted porch, which is where Stoicism gets its name. The philosophy he founded was a direct result of his shipwreck. It was a system designed to build an inner fortress that no storm could ever breach. Years later, looking back on the worst day of his life, Zeno is said to have remarked, "I made a prosperous voyage when I suffered a shipwreck." He understood a fundamental truth. The obstacle that seems to end our path is often the very thing that puts us on the right one. Our final story comes from the absolute pinnacle of power. Marcus Aurelius was not a slave or a ruined merchant. He was the emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world, and he seemed to hate it. From a young age, Marcus never wanted power. His dream was to be a philosopher, to live a quiet life of study and reflection, but duty called. When he became emperor, he was reportedly overwhelmed with a crushing sense of responsibility. He didn't see the throne as a prize, but as a burden. He once described his own magnificent imperial purple robes as nothing more than sheep's wool dyed in the gore of putrid shellfish, a clear echo of Zeno's lost cargo. His reign wasn't peaceful. It was defined by constant war and a devastating plague that killed millions. Every day he faced backstabbing politicians, incompetent officials, and the overwhelming weight of an empire in crisis. He was a man who had everything, yet felt completely trapped. So where did he turn? He turned inward. Every morning, before facing the chaos of his office, he would write to himself. These private notes were never meant to be published. They were a personal practice. We know them today as the Meditations. In those pages, he didn't write about military strategy or political victories. He wrote about controlling his anger, dealing with difficult people, and reminding himself of his own mortality. He constantly practiced what the Stoics called the dichotomy of control. He knew he couldn't stop the plague, he couldn't prevent betrayals, he couldn't guarantee victory, but he could control his own thoughts and actions. He could choose to act with courage, justice, and wisdom, no matter what was happening around him. This is the real meaning behind his famous line, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He trained himself to see every problem not as a roadblock, but as a chance to practice a virtue. The plague was a chance to practice courage. A betrayal was a chance to practice forgiveness. A difficult decision was a chance to practice justice. His throne wasn't a source of power, but a training ground for his soul. His life proves that Stoicism isn't just for those with nothing to lose, it's also for those who feel crushed by what they have. A North Korean girl who survived hell, a merchant who lost his fortune, and an emperor who dreaded his crown. 3 lives separated by thousands of years and completely different circumstances, all leading to one powerful truth. You don't control what happens to you, but you always control how you respond. Yeonmi Park found her freedom not when she crossed the border, but when she realized her mind was her own.
Zeno found his true wealth not on his ship, but in its wreckage, and Marcus Aurelius found his strength not in his title, but in his private commitment to virtue. Their stories teach us that Stoicism isn't about being passive or emotionless. It's about being an active participant in your own life. It's the understanding that resilience isn't something you're born with, it's something you forge. You forge it in the fire of your own personal shipwrecks, your own private battles, and your own impossible hardships. The challenges you're facing today, a job loss, a difficult relationship, a sense of anxiety about the future, these are the very materials you can use to build your own unbreakable mind. This ancient wisdom forged by real people in their darkest moments is your inheritance. It's a toolkit waiting for you to pick it up. What is a moment in your life that felt like a shipwreck but ended up redirecting you to something better? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might be the wisdom someone else needs to hear today. And if you want to continue exploring practical philosophy for a stronger mind, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching.